So my question to you was, what has starting your own nonprofit taught you about leadership, collaboration, and the power of real impact?
Okay. So initially going into the nonprofit side of things, it was initially built on the fact that we wanted to affect as much people as possible, right? And when you're talking about impact, what I believe leadership to employ is building systems, but rather than just visibility, right? In the current stage of things in Sri Lanka, at least I find that a lot of initiatives are geared towards getting as much engagement on their posts as possible. That's how they're quantifying impact, right? But I feel like leadership should entail broader change. It's better if it's systemic, because what I really want out of an initiative, what I want to lead is something that's going to last over like a long period of time, right? Independent of how much commitment there is into it. That's what I really embody, like embody leadership to be. And I also want to mention that, real impact is, slow, and it requires a lot of long-term patience, because a lot of these impact, we're talking about really broad concepts, like political participation, climate change, they're all very broad, and, they're diluted over, a certain period of time, right? And, so at certain times you might not see the, impact that you're making like right now, but, it's really important to stay in there and, trust that, what you're doing is actually going to work out. Also, I feel like what I've noticed personally was, a lot of leaders think that, uh, initially, even in the initial stages things, that they want to, really take up the responsibility of, most stuff that's going on. And that's basically, they're prioritizing control over collaboration. And it sounds like a basic textbook issue, but, it really does extend beyond that, because a lot of these leaders, they don't really grasp that that's going on. So
Yeah.
it's really passively deteriorating everything. The
Mhm.
last thing is, leadership is also about knowing when to take a break, because that's really one of the most important things that you can do, when your initiative isn't going as planned, or maybe you feel the burnout. It's really important to take a step back and really evaluate what you're doing, and maybe take a breather.
Mhm. Okay. So, Viranga, from your perspective, what do you think is the difference between actual, power sharing and just the apparent youth inclusion, the performative youth inclusion that usually many people do, just like you mentioned?
Yeah, to put it very briefly, performative, inclusion is sort of when you really call upon youth to be on the panel, but they're basically powerless, right? And
Yeah,
it can come
yeah.
in the form of conducting a workshop, but it's really just a workshop, and there isn't really much extending beyond that to support the youth in the power sharing mechanism, right? Genuinely, when if you think about it in a genuine youth empowerment way, what envision is that youth co-authoring policy, or at least providing statements that gets considered real time, right? And they get to manage budgets and hold authority in the public policy process. And we can really identify which is performative versus which is actually genuine, to test it in a sense. Who is writing all this, who is working across this, who's signing, and who's accountable, right? When
Yeah.
you really nail those finer details down, you can see whether youth are actually considered, right? Because it doesn't matter if youth supply a statement and it's not really getting any traction anywhere, right? That's, I think, the main difference between, performative inclusion and, genuine power sharing, which I find, sometimes it does blur the line a little bit, because, at most times it won't just be, um, genuine power sharing. It's always some sort of middle ground, right? But what we should, hope to achieve is, shift that towards the rightward end, and, really involve youth in, a genuine process, which is, more transparent and, more accessible.
Hmm. Yeah. Something that I also get asked a lot, something that I also went through was that I and many other youths, we feel kind of disengaged from the actual, governance because of the bureaucracy. There's this always this glass ceiling, and so how do you feel we could make governance more accessible and more inviting to such young people?
Okay, that's a really like amazing question because I really personally identify with what the question entails, particularly with regard to Sri Lanka's political instability and how politics was mystified through dynastic politics, right? It
Yeah.
was always the same people that's coming up and up again, and in a sense that that really distance the youth itself from the policy making process because they thought that if you don't come from such a family, you wouldn't have an option either way,
Mm,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So that's really playing, into the, youth disillusionment and all that. And, with regard to making more accessible, I think the first step is, really just sitting down and thinking it's not that much of the learning curve doesn't have to be that steep, right? If you really just support youth in identifying the concept, talking about how you can contribute towards it, that could come in the form of integrating civic education in early school systems, or even in later stages, working using visuals, infographics, gamification, and multilingual content, right? We should aim to give youth actual influence and in councils and budgets because uh participatory governance is sort of it's really I think it's a really hard balance to strike at times. And when you really do make it work towards what I just mentioned before, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it could really positively benefit the whole community. Youth will be more engaged, and the in turn the future generations are more inclined participate in politics, and it's really going to be such a positive reinforcement mechanism that's really going to work out for the community.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. If you had to describe climate change in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Okay. The first word I'm thinking of is urgent because, really,
Yeah, yeah,
climate change is, really pressing. And the next thing is, I think, collaboration because climate change can't be,
yeah,
taken into consideration
exactly.
of, yes.
Mhm. I don't
And the
think it
next
can be
thing,
actually combated at an individual level. I mean, you can make individual efforts, but it won't be that like large scale. So yeah, collaboration.
definitely. Because personally also I do believe, individual efforts play a large role in it because, working towards, not using as much plastic products,
Hmm.
and,
Yeah,
there's a
true.
lot of things involved, right? But on the grand scheme of things, right, we really need to think about this very critically. And when you think about it, there is only so much a person can achieve on their own. So I think collaboration plays a big
Hmm.
role in, climate change. Also, another thing is I think another word that I should, be using, I think is uh patience. I
Yeah,
really mentioned that a
yeah.
lot because I feel like, even with, more pressing issues such as elite capture of climate finance, I feel like a lot of these issues are, elongated by the fact that, the effects of climate change are diluted, right? They don't really come at, one point and they be like, it won't just stop at, one negative effect, right? It
Yeah.
takes over like a lot of years. So I think we need to have the patience, bathe through our initiatives and our work and move towards something that's not just one time, right? I don't trust in initiatives that go do a workshop and it ends there, right? It needs to be elongated towards maybe a multi-step process. That's really what I think about 3 words to describe climate
Right.
change.
Finally, what advice would you like to give to high school students across the global south who wish to take action beyond just awareness, especially in the realms of policy and governance?
Okay. So initially, I feel like, for high school students, the curve is going to be really hard. And I feel like, for me personally, how I got a grasp on things was through school, right? you could initially start by school, right? It doesn't need to be massive.
Yeah.
Even if it's just, 5 to 10 people, you can start there. And the next thing is don't wait for permission. And because, essentially this isn't going to be an issue that's, really going to be discussed as much. So if you do just wait for the opportunity to come, it might not ever, right? Not in the recent future. So you need to, start taking initiative. Just, if you have an idea, just click and, go forward with it. You can always, experiment. If that does not work out, you can move forward with another thing. What starting small or, starting at all is what matters. And another thing is, if you're planning on impacting something, I feel like the biggest part of that is, evaluating the systems that, really cause that. You know what I mean? Because you can't always be stuck in something that's, you can't achieve something that you can't describe really well. So for me personally, if I want, get involved with an initiative, with an opportunity, what I first do is, really sit down and think about it. I'll be like, what exactly am I impacting? Am I impacting this in a positive way that, can be feasible for me for to do it long term, right? So really you need to think about, what systems are at play, what parties are at play, all of that. And I think the next most important thing is, rather than trying to take your initiative global, try to build solutions that really address local gaps, right? Because that might be, more feasible for you and your local community. Because at the end of the day, you come from a community that's, really, um, at least for the most part, it's going to be the most defining factor of your work, because, you're really going to live through that, right? So I think that's one of the most important ones. And last but not least, I think the most important thing is staying strong. Because genuinely, even when I started, getting into this, what I felt of what I felt was there might not be as, as much interested people in your initiative, at least not locally. That's what I faced. But it's important, stay through it. And like at one point, I feel like you'll, really come to terms with everything that's going on. And you really, when you really get to that stage of things, you really get like that positive reinforcement, and you'll feel like doing it more and more. So it is really, really important that you stay strong and, stay committed and, understand that, what you're doing really does make an impact.
That's amazing. Another question that just came to my mind was, how do you how do you see the world in the next 25 years? Like, would it be in a better position than it is now, or in a not good position?
Okay. So I feel like, when we are really talking about that, personally, really being optimistic about it, it will be in a better position. But I think, really you can't really tell which, aspect of things it will be. Obviously, some things will be better and something will be for the worst, right? You can really not really explain, what's going to happen, and there's a lot of factors at play, right? But very largely, I feel like it is going to be better, because I feel like now more than ever, there are a lot of grassroots initiatives popping up. More students are involved. And I feel like, in this way, it's going to get to a point where, these issues aren't going to be something that's, you're advocating for alone, but much rather very broad and, very discussed, right? So I feel like that's, the first step to, real change. So very optimistically, I feel like it'll be better.
Mhm. All right. So I think that's all for today. Viranga, it was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope the audience like this podcast as well. I learned so much from you. I mean, at 17, you started everything that you have right now that you're working on, and you have so many ambitions, so many aspirations, which is amazing. And it made me feel quite positive that people are actually doing something. There's this term called greenwashing. When you claim that you actually are, um, s- you are engaged in sustainable practices, you care about climate, but it's just for, the apparent reasons. You don't actually care about it. So people who are genuinely concerned, such people do exist, and that really gives me hope. And I hope that we can actually make an impact, and you hopefully can achieve what you dream for, what you wish for. And thank you once again for joining. Um, so yeah, that's it.